Welcome back to College Football Addiction. Spencer McLaughlin here. We've got a big one in the Big Ten this week. It still kind of feels a little bit weird. I don't know if you've adjusted to that completely or
Nope.
not, but
Nope. Not at all.
it still
Not at all.
feels weird. Locked on College Football, Locked on Ducks. I do like bringing people on that have more of the national perspective when we do these big games because I feel like you can kind of speak to both sides, but we'll make this pretty Ducks focused. Thanks for joining, man. How you doing?
Doing great. Ready for the game. It's been an awesome week to be a content creator in the college football space. There's so much to get to, and then Mike Gundy got fired.
Yeah, no, it just keeps going. Like whether it's the SEC releasing schedules, the
ACC is going to 9
ACCs,
games now. It's all my scheduling dream in college football is slowly but surely coming true. We're getting there. The Big Ten just needs to require a Power 4 non-conference opponent, and a key tenet of what I have argued for in college football for a long time will become reality.
And then we get like 2 years down the road and we shake it all up with realignment again. So we can all mess up the
2 years down the road. We didn't even know who the Pac-12 was going to add for next year.
Yeah, that's true. So a big one in Happy Valley this weekend. Let's talk Oregon, just big picture quickly, and then we'll get into the matchup. What has impressed you the most? I understand the opponents, but they've taken care of business. They've done what they needed to do. Really, both these teams to a certain extent. But what has Oregon? What has maybe surprised you or impressed you the most with them this year?
The fluidity of the offense. I mean, from the moment the season began, it has been fluid, consistent, dynamic, explosive, well-connected. It's a well-oiled machine. It just looks like Will Stein's an even better offensive coordinator than we all thought, and we all thought he was really good. For him to have adjusted to this many new pieces, you've got, I'll say, 3.5 new starters along the offensive line, because one guy who's starting, Davey Uli, was kind of a starter last year. He's basically the 6th offensive lineman that made some spot starts. You've got all new receivers. You lost Evan Stewart before the season. You lost Tez Johnson and Trayshawn Holden, and you lost Jurion Dickey right before the season, and it hasn't mattered. You lose Dylan Gabriel, quarterback, and it hasn't mattered. Dante Moore's looked great. You lose Jordan James in the running back room, and you look like you have 4 running backs that could go for 100 yards in a game. So, yeah, from literally the moment the season kicked off, Oregon has looked like they are capable of playing at a really high level. And I thought there might be more of an adjustment phase for them, frankly, and that just hasn't really been the case. That's not to say there haven't been, a couple of warts here and there, moments where they were less than perfect, but I think that's pretty typical for, frankly, any college football team. And it hasn't resulted in Oregon needing to play their starters in the fourth quarter. So that'll change this weekend, obviously, but they have not yet been sweating at all in the fourth quarter. It's been which backups are going to play.
Yeah, no, and I understand the competition, I understand the schedule, but they've certainly been one of, if not the most dominant team to start college football. And I understand they're not ranked number 1 right now just because of who they have or haven't played. But just in watching their games and seeing some of the stuff later, they've looked really, really impressive. And again, they'll get a big test this weekend, and we'll talk more about that. But just the way that they have come out. And I almost wonder, I don't know if Dan has talked about this at all. Some coaches really try and shy away from, what happened last year and the way they finished. But I almost just wonder if there's not an extra motivation because of how high they were going into the playoff and then how low they felt running into the buzzsaw that was Ohio State. I don't know if he, I don't know if he said anything or if he uses that kind of motivation or if the guys on that team are just like, hey, we're not going to, I know that some of them weren't there, but hey, we're not going to let that happen again. And that's kind of motivated them. But it almost feels like there's that extra chip of like, all right, we ain't doing this again.
His mantra for the year, he said at media days, has been double down, and it's been double down on their process, double down on their belief in one another. And obviously you have to make a couple of adjustments in the process because 34-0 with a minute to go in the first half is not something that anyone ever wants to see experience or frankly think about again. From an Oregon standpoint, I think Lanning is, like most coaches, an incredibly competitive guy. And, I wouldn't say he downplayed it when asked at Big Ten Media Days about how much that's fueling it. Like, he acknowledged, like, it's definitely there. I think about it. But, looking forward and talking about this team and whatnot, I just get the sense that it eats at him every single day when he wakes up. How could it not? You had a real opportunity to go win a national championship in your 3rd season as a head coach, and The number one takeaway I had in that game, Oregon got out coached. That's what happened. Ryan Day, in all three key matchups, Ryan Day beat Dan Lanning, Will Stein lost to Jim Knowles, and Chip Kelly beat Tosh Lupoy. It's a clean sweep across the board. That's what it came down to. There was not some gargantuan talent gap. I know that because I watched those teams play in October, and Oregon won the football game. And yeah, it was a different game. And, Oregon had a couple breaks. Oregon had also a couple of incredibly sloppy moments there. And you look at the number of players Oregon had drafted, and you look at the number of players Ohio State had drafted. All right, you can say there's a slight edge for the Buckeyes, but that was a real shot that Oregon let go by the wayside because Ohio State was just better. And so, I think you have to be able to learn from those mistakes as a coaching staff. And, so far this year, I think all three of those coaches have been really, really good so far. Again, they've not been tested like what they are going to face this Saturday in Happy Valley. But, I think it's easy to evaluate players because you have more stats to work with and more video and game. But, I look at this Oregon coaching staff, and year after year after year, Dan Lanning gets better. Tosh Lupoy has gotten better. Will Stein gets better. And I think they're dialed in right now. I don't know if you saw the quote that Lanning gave after the Oregon State game. He's in his post-game presser, and he's asked about how long do you enjoy this one before, you flip the switch and focus on Ohio State. And without skipping a beat, he just goes, switch is already flipped.
I've asked this to a couple of different people when there have been big matchups. I'm going to, no matter what your true answer is, I'm going to make you pick one side of the aisle here because I'm going to take the other side. I think, all right, I'll get right back to chatting with Spencer, but first let's make some money together. Get out your sleeper app. Let's play the more or less game. I know we usually play this on Thursday on the Power 2, but we're going to play right now and make some money on the Penn State Oregon game. We're going to take Malik Benson. We're going to take his over on 35.5 receiving yards. Grab the more there. Listen, speaking of more, I like Dante Moore's over on passing touchdowns at 1.5. I understand that Penn State defense is really good. Just about to ask about that, but give me the more on that as well. And I'm going to pair that with Nick Singleton going over 55.5 rushing yards. Listen, I know that can be a trap because which running back do they feature a little bit more? Give me Singleton against this Oregon defense over 55.5. More than that number of rushing yards. Pair that together, put some money on it. Use our code CFA for 100% match up to $100. Sleepers terms of use apply. So check their terms and conditions for more information. Now back to chatting with Spencer. This game is more important for Penn State, right?
100%. It's not even
it at home. Them getting to the semifinal last year.
Yeah.
Allard coming back, all the hype around everything they've done, bringing in Jim Knowles. But if you were going to make the argument for why this game is actually more important for Oregon, even though you may not agree with it, why is this game so important for Oregon? I'm going to have you argue on the other side of the aisle here.
Okay. I do flat out believe there's more on the line for Penn State.
Yeah.
A loss is more punitive and negative for Penn State than it is for Oregon. And I think a win for Penn State allows them to gain more than a loss makes Oregon get, knocked down or anything, unless it's just an absolute blowout, which I don't anticipate. So the argument for Oregon would be you have, coming into this season, one of the lowest returning production metrics in all of college football. It's 43%. It's about 105th in the country. So you have a lot of new. You have some new transfers. You have new players that are going to see the field. You've got a new quarterback, a new offensive line for the most part. You have a lot of new. And so when you go up against four teams that you are just more talented than, you don't actually know what your team is capable of being. And this is your measuring stick game. If you go on the road and win, you can win a national championship this year. That is a clear-cut defining moment that in everybody's view should shift their perception of Oregon's really talented to, Oregon can go win it all. If you can win at Penn State, who can't you beat in the country? Not that there aren't other good teams out there that could beat Oregon. I think Georgia looks really good. And Florida State might be really good. I don't know. I don't know yet on Florida State. I'm
TBD there too.
Yeah, I'm still
the best, obviously.
Yeah. No, I know you are as a Florida State guy, but for Oregon, this is your opportunity to prove to yourself, to prove to the country that you are a national title threat again this season. And it's not a soft reset sort of year where you just make the playoff and, build for 2026, which is kind of how I've described it, frankly. But if you want to prove you're a national title contender, you go beat Penn State on the road. You go beat them on their home field where they have every single advantage, because this is a team that was in the national semifinal last year. That is very similar to what they were a year ago, that went out and didn't just invest in transfer receivers, but went out and invested in the best defensive coordinator in all of college football, who clowned Oregon in the Rose Bowl. That sets the stage in a significant way. It stacks the deck against Oregon. If you go out and win when you've got fewer cards to play in your hand than your opponent, that's a heck of a statement, particularly for Dan Lanning.
When we look at this matchup of Penn State and Oregon, talk to me about Oregon's. You mentioned some of the playmakers on offense and the guys that have stepped in at wide receiver and running back, and obviously Dante stepping in at QB. Talk to me about the matchup. And again, this is why I like having you on, because a little bit more national perspective and well-versed here too. But the matchup with a really good running back room, a quarterback who hasn't been maybe as precise as Dante has been through some of his games, but who at times has put things together really well and was expected to have a really good year this year. Again, it's hard to count much of what's happened so far this season, though it hasn't been great by any means. But just thoughts on that Oregon defense going up against a Penn State offense that at least has the continuity that you would want and picked up a couple of guys out of the portal at wide receiver. Just thoughts there on how Oregon may perform.
Run defense is paramount. Penn State's offense hasn't been as good as it should be this year. I think that's kind of a crisis of identity, and maybe there's an aspect of, we brought in these 3 transfer receivers, we got to get them involved, and maybe they haven't quite figured that out yet. Penn State ran for 297 yards against Oregon in the Big Ten championship game last year. And the biggest question you ask about Oregon's defense going into this game is probably the run defense. I think people that just comb through box scores would see Northwestern ran for 179 yards. This is a problem. Well, there's a lot of context missing there. 79 of that came against the third stringers, so I'm not really concerned about all of that. And Northwestern had 1.5 drives where they ran the ball with success against the Oregon defense. Those drives resulted in 0 points, just so we're clear. Oregon's pass defense has been incredible, and last year they were not as good against the run as they needed to be. And there were a variety of reasons for that Tosh Lupoi has to have his defense prepared for in this game. I am a little worried about the linebacker play. Bryce Betcher is good. Jerry Mixon has come on this year. Devin Jackson has not played up to his full potential yet. This would be a great time for him to do that. But I think that's the most exploitable aspect of Oregon's run defense, is how those guys have played. But I think overall, they just held Oregon State to 67 yards rushing. And as much as one game can fuel your opinion, I think there's just an inclination, because of how the Big Ten championship game went, to be negative about Oregon's run defense and say Northwestern was bad and Oregon State was good, but Oregon State doesn't matter as much. There are weaknesses here. I mean, Oregon made the adjustments they needed to in the game against the Beavs after Oregon fans were all freaking out on, not all, but plenty were freaking out on Twitter. I literally had people tweeting at me calling for Tosh Lupoi's job because Oregon State got one drive and they scored a touchdown and they ran the ball a couple of times. And yeah, against Penn State, you'd like to be sharper than that, but also you'd like to see the adjustments get made. Well, the adjustments got made. And I also think Oregon played like a team that was ready for Penn State more than they were for Oregon State, because the Civil War, unfortunately, just doesn't have the juice that it used to when I was growing up in college football. So, I think defensively for the Ducks, it's a young secondary that is getting its biggest test, but they've been really impressive so far. Brandon Finney, the true freshman, a 5-star recruit, it looks like a superstar out there. Dylan Thieneman, the safety, is a stud. They use him in a lot of different creative ways, kind of like how Ohio State uses Caleb Downs. Curious to see if Jim Knowles does that again with Zachy Wheatley coming into this one. So I think there are a lot of really fun, X's and O's sorts of matchups and scheme breakdowns you can get into there. But, for Oregon defensively in this game, the biggest knock on Tosh Lupoi so far is his big game performance. It hasn't been good. His defenses are allowing over 30 points per game when Oregon goes up against an opponent of Penn State's caliber or anything comparable. They gave up at least 30 points to every playoff team that they played last year, which wound up being 4 if you count Ohio State twice, because they played Boise State, they played Ohio State, they played Penn State, and then they played Ohio State again. And in those games, they gave up 34, 31, 37, and 41 points. So I think there's as much pressure on Tosh Lupoi specifically in the eyes of a lot of Oregon fans. And for Penn State, the offense hasn't been that good. I think Andy Kotelnicki's got to take his own advice. Playing offense is a Dairy Queen blizzard. It looks really complex, but it's just vanilla ice cream with your favorite toppings. And for him in this game, I think that's going to be go to the game plan that worked in the Big Ten title game and see if Oregon's made the adjustments, and then have some counters off of that if they have.
All of a sudden, I'm hungry for a blizzard here at 9:15 Eastern
time.
Oh,
dude. What's your blizzard
of? Yeah, this is not important, but what's your blizzard of choice?
Oh, I'm so a mint Oreo guy.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely phenomenal. You give me the green with where I can see the black chunks of Oreo that are in it. A mint brownie is also really good. Like I love that particular combination of blizzard. I think that it just pairs together very well. There's something about, a really, really cold amount of ice cream and the mint flavor that goes great. And then you just get the sweetness from the chocolate to cut with it. It goes perfectly.
So I typically do just like an Oreo, but I want extra Oreo in it. But I am a mint chocolate fan for sure. So I'm not hating on your pick at all. But I usually just do double. I'm like, do double
Oreo's
Oreo.
Good. Yeah, Oreo's good. And every other fast food chain that has tried to make something as good as the Blizzard, I'm sorry, you have failed miserably.
My wife will sometimes be like, "Can we get Culver's?" And I'm like, "There's a Dairy Queen a minute from our house."
Yeah,
we're getting Culver's. Like,
and by the way, I'm not throwing shade at Culver's here. Culver's is good. I've had the frozen custard.
It's good.
Product. It's good. Not a Blizzard. If you give me an option, I'm not taking a McFlurry. I'm not taking custard. I'm not taking any of that. Give me a Blizzard every single time.
It's incredible. Other side of the ball, other side of the blizzard too, maybe. Other side of the ball, Penn State hasn't given up anything this year. Now, again, competition's been terrible. So you do have to take everything with a grain of salt, and we'll find, all this speculating that we do, we'll find out on Saturday. But their defense has been pretty staunch. It was good last year. And then you added maybe the best defensive coordinator in the game too. Oregon's certainly known for their offense and has been good offensively this year. What's your confidence level that they can have success against a Penn State defense that, again, all things considered, we think may be really good?
I think moderate, like definitely above, if I'm putting it on a 1 to 10 scale, I'd probably be a 6.5 in this spot. The one road environment they endured was at Northwestern, which was challenging for a different reason. And that's that there wasn't any juice in the stadium. It was a 12,000 seat temporary environment on Lake Michigan. It was kind of cool. Also looked like a high school game in a lot of ways. This is going to be very different. And so Oregon shouldn't lack the juice to come out and be motivated to get off to a strong start. 2 weeks in a row, they have not played a good first quarter of football, which is a stark contrast from the first two games where they came out and Montana State and Oklahoma State had no shot. Oregon had 2 touchdowns in its first 3 plays against Oklahoma State. And against Montana State, they scored on their first, I think, 4. They didn't punt, I don't believe, against Montana State. So you contrast that with Northwestern, early kickoff, weird environment. They punted on their first drive. You look at the Oregon State game, they had 7 points with 5:40 remaining in the second quarter. They put up 2 touchdown drives in that time frame. But when that happened, I knew that was possible and likely going to arrive. I kind of watched it and went, where was that in the first quarter? This Oregon State team is down bad right now. You out-talent them at every single position significantly. You should have been up 21-7 with 7 minutes to go in the first quarter, or 21-0, quite frankly. So I think for Oregon in this spot, the offensive line also getting its biggest test. It's why this game is so fun is, Oregon has passed the test that it has seen so far. They've been in algebra class. Algebra class. I don't know why that was so much of a mouthful. I took algebra anyway. So they've been in algebra. And, there's some things in algebra that you go, well, this isn't that hard. I mean, at least for more mathematically inclined people, perhaps there's some people that look at algebra, go, I can't figure it out. One of those guys is Mike Gundy. I can't figure it out. It's modern college football. I can't figure it out. Now you're going up to calculus, So the kid that got an A in algebra on paper, you look at it and go, I feel good about his chances to go and at least get a B or B plus in calculus. Sometimes though, it doesn't connect. Now, the kid that got a C minus in algebra and barely passed, is not going to go and succeed in the calculus class, but Oregon isn't there. They got an A in algebra, but now they have to level up in a pretty significant way. and you're skipping past algebra 2 going from your previous opponents up to Penn State. So I think that's what's so fun is the offensive line's new. They've looked good. How do they look against a Penn State front? Dante Moore's looked incredible. How does he look against a real defense with Jim Knowles as the defensive coordinator? The secondary's been great. What happens when they go up against 3 legit power 4 caliber receivers? How does the defensive line perform against a great Penn State offensive line? A lot of questions to get answered. And for both these teams, I think you can apply that. Sure. I think it's more so for Oregon because Penn State has so much back from last year that went to the national semifinal. I know what their potential is. But for Oregon, I don't fully know yet. And I think that's why this game is so interesting.
One more, and then we'll predict it and get out. You mentioned the stopping the run being paramount. So I'll see if we can pivot off of that and kind of ask another one. Do you have an X factor in this, whether it's a player on player matchup, whether it's a battle in the trenches specific, or just what's your X factor in this game?
Yeah, deny Dennis Sutton against Oregon's tackles. New guys coming from the group of 5 ranks, Isaiah World and Alex Harkey. World in particular, highly coveted transfer portal prospect, has been okay this year. Not been bad by any stretch. Dante Moore's been sacked 1 time, and it was a sack actually given up by Alex Harkey. Pretty sure it was Harkey. It might have been a guard pulling around late to get over there, but it came from the right side. But Dante Moore is as responsible for him not having been sacked so far this year as the O-line is, because he has been really good about getting the ball out on time. His pocket presence and mobility has also been nothing short of sensational. I mean, he hasn't made a mistake. He hasn't made many. He's had 1 dangerous throw this year, and it was a ball that got tipped. Now, if it hadn't been tipped, maybe it was intercepted, maybe not. Depends if he can fit it into a tight window. He got fooled by a safety that he thought was in man coverage. But I think that for Oregon in this spot, you've got to be able to keep Dante Moore clean. The Penn State front 4, from what I've seen, they look big. They look physical, really, really physical. And you have to bring that in this game. Because if you're taking Kenyon Sadiq out of routes, or if you're taking a receiver off the field to bring in Jamari Johnson so that Sadiq is out there and you have to chip and help your tackles a lot, that's taking a weapon out of the passing game. So Oregon has a lot of those, and you want to be able to just protect with 5. But if the tackles struggle in pass protection, yeah, you have problems.
So I kind of like Oregon here. I don't know if I have a real prediction or anything like that, but I just think they've looked a little more complete. And again, it's hard to. That's kind of what I base it on, right? Like Penn State.
Let me ask you real quick. Would you have said that about Ohio State going into last year's game against Oregon at Autzen?
I blacked a lot of last year out, understandably. No, I think I took Ohio State in that game. I took Ohio State to go on the road.
Yeah, the point that I've brought up, and all off season talking about this game, I have liked Penn State to win. I still do. I feel better about Oregon's chances after having seen the first few games, because they have looked so cohesive and explosive offensively. And they've done a lot of things really well. Last year, though, if you looked at Ohio State's first 5 games and Oregon's first 5 games, one team was more impressive than the other against inferior competition. That answer was Ohio State. Now, that proved to be a great game. It was tremendous, but what was the differentiating factor? Oregon was at home.
Home field,
we saw that in the Rose Bowl, right? Like, that was the impact of playing at Autzen Stadium. If this were a neutral site or at Autzen, yeah, I'm probably taking Oregon. Because it's at Penn State, yeah, I'm leaning Nittany Lions there. Oregon struggled with Idaho and Boise State out of the gate. And Dylan Gabriel was throwing a bunch of red zone interceptions against UCLA and Michigan State last year. That would have been really easy fodder to talk yourself into Ohio State's playing better, but I think the teams have another gear. So I lean Penn State. I think it's just going to be an awesome game. It's going to be a beautiful spectacle of college football. I can't wait to watch.
Yeah, I think I'm going to Athens for that game, which it sucks that both are on like right at the same time. But I did check, and I did get a Wi-Fi password because I want to watch it. I want to watch both while I'm there.
Yeah, you can't not do that.
Yeah. So, Lean Penn State, Spencer, where can people follow you, find all your work? We'll link it all in the description, but give them a shout out.
Locked On College Football and Locked On Ducks is on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. This year, it's all year round, Monday through Friday. But this time of year, man, it's just as often as I can put content out.
Yeah, no, same. I've been sitting in this chair all day. So
Yeah, on Monday, I literally didn't move from this chair for several hours. There were so many things I had to do. So yeah, TJ, great to be back on with you, man.
Certainly not complaining though.
It's the best. No, it's the best.
This is the best. Yeah, I'm getting paid to talk about football. So
yeah, talking about actual games when you go through an entire offseason, finding stories to talk about, which there are, and there are fun things to discuss that time of year. It's nothing like actual games. Nothing.
Appreciate you, buddy. Good luck this weekend.
Thanks, man.